Good morning, Alan, or good afternoon for us over here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I've been really excited about having this conversation for various reasons. So yeah, an absolute privilege for you to join us in the M&A Diaries. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, thank you, and thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. It's always interesting to learn who's podcasting and why they may be interested in me, and so I like talking about what I love talking about. So it's a nice match. So here
Yeah,
here at
no,
your disposal.
absolutely, especially your journey within obviously Baker Tilly as well. So before we do get started and into conversation, it'd be great if you wouldn't mind, for those at home listening in that don't know yourself, would you be able to just give a brief overview of your career, your time at Baker Tilly, and kind of what you're doing now, and then we can get into the nitty gritty from there.
Yeah, well, thanks. Sure. Alan Whitman. I'm a public accounting brat. Frankly, I started off at PW, Coopers and Lybrand, PwC, and then joined a firm which is now Baker Tilly. For whatever reason, I wanted to be an accountant in ninth grade in high school. I really don't know why. Anyway, it worked, and so I've had a wonderful career as a tax professional, building an international platform, and then finding myself as the next CEO of Baker Tilly in 2000, end of 2014, to begin leading the firm in 2015. And we had a phenomenal journey, a phenomenal run. As a friend of mine recently said, we took it from just shy of 500 million to $1.5 billion in a very short 8 years. And I would suggest to you that the lion's share of the growth happened in the last 5 years of my tenure as CEO. And since then, since retiring from Baker Tilly, I've been doing a lot of coaching, a lot of speaking. I'm actually writing a book about my journey and about the journey that the team enjoyed and succeeded at. And so that'll be coming out later this fall. And so all things sharing my words of experience. I don't know if they're words of wisdom, but certainly words of experience, and advising a number of CEOs, whether it be startup CEOs all the way to firms of maybe $500 million in size, and all the C-suite people in between. So it's been a wonderful professional journey that I've had.
Brilliant. That sets the scene, and as you said there, that growth in that time is rapid growth, to say the least. And for us at the M&A Diaries, that's really what we want to drill into and hear all your experience and wisdom from those times. So let's start right at that Baker Tilly journey. So you was working there, and then the opportunity to step up to CEO come round. Talk us through that scenario. How did that first come onto the radar for you?
Well, it was a little bit of a surprise. As soon as I joined Baker Tilly, my predecessor asked me if I wanted to lead the international platform. I asked him what that was, and he said, "I don't know, but you'll figure it out." And we were the largest firm of the network, the Baker Tilly network, and we needed to build the firm into being both capable and savvy from an international perspective. Being a U.S. firm, we were very U.S. centric, having been founded in Wisconsin, the Upper Midwest. We didn't know what international meant, and for a variety of reasons, prior to joining Baker Tilly, I'd had experience advising international clients, and so I jumped in the pool, the deep end of the pool. Sometime in the summer of 2013, I was on a bus to a after hours event, a partner event, and a partner of mine leaned over and said, "Hey, you should put your name in to be considered to be the next CEO." And I laughed. I wasn't here for a long time. I'm from a small practice. Not everybody knows me. And she said, "No, quite the opposite, Alan. Everybody knows you. Everybody trusts you because you've been helping them serve clients and win new clients with this international wrapper, if you will, differentiator. And I think a lot of people would support you." And so I said, "Well, okay, sure. I'll jump in." And I jumped in, and one thing led to another. And I got the call midway through September of 14 that I had been elected to be the next CEO. And so there was no plan. There was no, it was an organic journey.
Yeah, and looking back at that bus journey, if you didn't have that endorsement from your colleague, do you think you would have stepped into that CEO role?
Probably not, James. Probably not. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I
and
doubt it.
And that context there as well. So I'm gathering that your predecessor, there was talk about them retiring or moving on, which is why these conversations were starting to happen.
It was all planned. My predecessor, Tim, who's the GOAT in this profession, he's one of the greatest of all time, had been the CEO at that point for 15 or 16 years. And
Right.
he wanted to ascend, if you will, to being the chairman of the AICPA, which is a very once storied organization connecting with SEMA outside of the US, AICPA, SEMA, the global association. And it's a very, very prestigious position. And that he wanted to do that. And so it was all planned. We knew when he was going to begin spending all of his time, which was June 1st of 2015. And so it was very orchestrated. The process, that is,
Fantastic.
not my election, the process.
No, understand. So look, as we mentioned right at the top of the conversation, there was some rapid growth, and I understand during that period, as you said, growing it from circa $500 million to 1.5 billion, there was about 20 odd transactions, or plus 20 transactions. So acquisition being a large part of that growth. So for you as the CEO at that time, and your other fellow leadership team, what was the attraction to growing via acquisition at that point in time? Was that something that you had in your mind stepping in? It's like, right, we've got an opportunity here to really grow this business and go great guns.
It's interesting. From 2000 to 2010, Baker Tilly was the fastest growing firm in the country. And then we had the great, the financial crisis, and we stalled. We really stalled. And while we were still a wonderful firm and we weren't growing the way we organically. We did some acquisitions, but we weren't growing organically the way we had enjoyed in the early 2000s. And so this was one of high growth, then flattened growth from an organic perspective. We did one major deal when we merged with Parente Beard in 2014, taking us from 330 to 475. But the organic piece of it was just not working. We'd lost our way. And then we ramped it up again, kind of downshifted and off we go. The pillars of my candidacy were revered brand, collaboration, and celebrate people. And that resonated with people. And I wanted to return us to the glory days of high organic growth. Because in my thinking, and I think most people's thinking, that the most valuable growth is organic growth. The cheapest growth is organic growth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's the true value, or the litmus test of the value of an organization, their ability to grow organically. And so that was always very important to me. And then I had different goals. I wanted us to be a top 10 firm. I wanted us to be that revered brand. I wanted us to be the darling in the profession. And the best way to do that is either shrink to be a boutique and be known for one thing, or to scale to be known as a leading firm in the profession. And, I'm happy to say, and proud, happy, that we passed a lot of firms by. I remember back in the 2010, circa 2010, we were in, and this is well known, we were in a three-way merger conversation with three firms. We backed out. The other two firms merged. So they were double our size back then. And when I retired, we had passed that firm by. They had a starting point. We had passed that firm by like they were standing still. Great firm, but we had, and there was other firms. I remember meeting with another firm right before I was in the chair, and they were twice our size. And we were talking about mergers, and they said, well, we'll give you one board seat, and, maybe we'll give you a couple leadership positions. And we're like, heck, that, no way. Heck, no, we're not doing that. And we got on our horses and we passed that firm by because we were very progressive. So I think the not the culture, but the innate energy in the firm was grow, and grow very deliberately, intentionally, and grow very in a very structured way. And so, we went on a journey.
Fantastic. And we'll go into it a little bit more and unpick it. But I think whenever any two firms are merging or acquiring another, that cultural alignment is absolutely key. And if you're not there together at the start, you need to at least know that you're aligned on that vision going forward, right? Otherwise, it's just not going to work. We're in a people business at the end of the day, the accountancy practice space. So,
Yeah.
no, it's important part there. So just staying with that time and these acquisition opportunities and other mergers, there's so many different dynamics at play, which is driving the activity levels that we're seeing right now. I just wonder back then, going back circa 10 years ago, what were the dynamics at play then that were driving people to have conversations with a Baker Tilly, for example, and saying, this would be great to join forces?
Well, the consolidation journey was well underway, and competition became even more fierce than what it had been. Firms realized that the cost of entry to invest or to transform was ever as expensive as it ever was, if not more. And the platform firms like a Baker Tilly, who were able to build a well-articulated, disciplined, sensible strategy, were the ones that people wanted to be a part of. Look, we never were we were never the highest bidder, we weren't always the highest bidder. And more likely than that, we weren't the highest bidder. We didn't build better relationships like everybody says, or we're nicer. Of course, we were a wonderfully cultured organization, founded a foundation of great values. The differentiator, James, to our ability to win, I think all but one deal that we chased, one deal, was our aggressiveness, our progressiveness, and our ability to articulate a well-designed strategy throughout the organization. And so you can talk about culture, you can talk about values, you can talk about all that, which of course they're kind of table stakes. But the true differentiator, of Baker Tilly was our ability to display and then execute a very progressive strategy designed to deliver value to clients.
And of course, once you've proven that once, twice, three times,
Oh,
those firms that have joined you, they can then spread the word that, guys, this is great on the other side of a transaction. And for me, that's such a powerful tool when I'm working with clients of ours now, where we're introducing new acquisition opportunities to them. The vendors or the guys that are looking to sell or join the firm, they just want to speak to others that have gone through that process and then see what life
right.
is like on the other side as well.
So think about it, James. Boston, New York, Indianapolis, a global firm, Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Seattle, California, from the Bay Area down to San Diego, Bay, LA, Orange County, San Diego, one of the number one Sage Intacct VAR. All these firms were competitive pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
Competitive pursuits.
Yep.
And we won them all.
Yep.
Because not just because we have a great culture, not just because we have nice people, because we understood what we were there to do, and the strategy articulation shined through.
Yeah, and it's still good to see that those dynamics at play resonate in today's market. I mean, today's market, the main drivers are lack of succession, the fight for talent, both attraction and retention. I mean, obviously the development of AI and technology now, generally people are quite worried about keeping the pace of that. So there are independent firms now that feel safer but joining a larger firm, knowing that they might have the infrastructure, the resource to be able to invest in tech and AI and keep a pace with it, as well as regulatory admin. I don't know how much that is in the US, but over here in the UK, regulatory admin is becoming more and more and more of a pain, and more hoops to jump through and red tape. So people are like, do you know what? It's becoming ever more difficult to run a practice. I'd love to alleviate some of that heavy lifting and then join a firm where I can concentrate more for what I got into the profession for, which is to look after my clients and develop my team, right?
Well, yes. I everybody talks about growth, and I growth, of course. I talk about building scale, and scale is different than growth. Scale is an infrastructure. Scale is a foundation, and Look, scale gives you a few things. Well, actually, it gives you many things, two of which I want to focus on. One is financial capital. There's more money to be had to make the investments in the infrastructure. And by the way, yes, in the UK and in Europe, there's much more regulatory restriction than in the US. Now we have the PCAOB and the SEC, but that's for listed companies. I couldn't imagine operating on a daily basis in your markets. As I said, I've done a lot of international work, and it's mind-boggling how restrictive it is. Anyhow, it works. But financial capital, of course, more money to invest in these platforms that these smaller firms can invest in because the price of entry is the same. And then the second is intellectual capital. You build scale, you have more James, you have more Allens, you have more Johns, Sarahs, Sues. And as you said, this is a people business, and the people drive the business, execute the strategy, and drive the business, and they're the machines that provide the product too. So as you scale, you get more people to be able to, one, build more scale, and two, try different things. And that's the value. These smaller firms, yes, succession, yes, attracting of talent, that will always be the case. Actually having in the middle of the firm, the middle swath, more than the 3 or 4 people they have is a huge differentiator.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, you've touched upon the value of growth and scale. Just reflecting on that time of that growth and those acquisitions you're going through, can you share with us some of the main challenges that you come across in terms of, that growth and scale, but, from culture, from ensuring that the plan is executed it should be, from integration? It'd be great just to get a little bit of insight into those challenges that you come across.
Yeah. I've if you've read my material, you know that I say all roads lead to and from strategy. Strategy is the trunk of the tree, and everything hangs off the trunk of the tree. It starts there, it ends there, etc. And to me, the better you are at executing strategy, the better everything else is. And so I'm a huge advocate for designing a strategy. In fact, I'm helping a $70 million firm in the mountain time zone in the mountain states right now. And it's not that we're coming up with anything unique. We're coming up with something that they can follow. They can all align behind. And to me, that is a huge enabler for growth and for culture. Frankly, Baker Tilly, a lot of people challenge this. Baker Tilly grew rapidly, north of 10% per year organically, and another 12 or so percent. We were growing at 22, 23%, fastest growing firm for a number of years.
Yeah, crazy growth.
And our culture got stronger, James. It literally got stronger as we continued to grow. It changed, it evolved because we were bringing on people from other parts of the country, the Midlands versus London. They're different cultures.
Absolutely.
Same Brits, but different. And you put it together, and now you build another culture, and a better culture. And so culture was ever so strong and increasingly strong. The challenge is, as you've asked about growth, look, humans can only do so much. And when the humans are expected to sell and deliver, that's hard. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so hot you can run an engine. When you run an engine forever, it burns out. When you run an engine too hot, it blows. And humans need breaks. And so the challenge of how do we enable the humans, the people, to do more? How do we do things with them, for them, and in spite of them? Because there are some technicians that don't want to grow at all. And I call those, we need to build the engines to do things with, for, and in spite of. And so the challenge was figuring out, how do we optimize? How do we remove the barriers, the friction points, in order for people to do what was most important: grow, serve clients, or look after clients, deliver services. So that was one. Another thing that you need to grow is you need a differentiated message. You need tools. You need new services. You need to continue. You don't want Me Too things. You want unique offerings to differentiate yourself in the market. And how do you bundle them? So there's all sorts of things. I would say, though, we were lucky, like I'm sure most firms. We had a lot of A-type personalities. that always loved the chase, that always loved to win. We never lost that insurgency mindset of a founder, and we just rekindled it and came around, the firm put our arms around the people to say, hey, we're here for you. We're here with you. And sometimes we're going to do things because you can't or you don't want to. And so it was all for one, one for all. It was our firm, our strategy, ours to execute.
So it sounds to me that one of the main plans from your side, if you like, or playbook, was to create an environment where people can drive innovation, and bring up ideas to you to bring forward from within the team, and you just puppeteering from the top, if you like, and bring them forward.
Yes. One of the things that we needed to do in order to enable people to be free to explore is to build some discipline and systematize the organization. You know, a lot of people in this profession will complain to their leaders, I don't want to do it the way the firm wants because you're ruining my entrepreneurial spirit. And I would always say, I'm not God. I can't ruin your spirit. So let's put that off the table. And frankly, I read this once, and it holds so true. So Jocko Willink, Jocko Willink, I think it's Willink. He's a former Navy SEAL. Jocko Willink. He's got a book. He's got a podcast. He's a motivational guy, great guy. He was a former Navy SEAL in Afghanistan, and you should. And his first book was Extreme Ownership. His second book was, I think, The Dichotomy of Leadership. So Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership. And in Extreme Ownership, it talks about all the things that had to happen for the missions to be successful in Afghanistan. And one of the things he said was discipline equals freedom. And I'm like, that's brilliant, because many people don't like the discipline. They want to do it their own way. But frankly, when we've got 400 people doing it their own way, that doesn't give us much time to explore new things because everybody's doing it their own way. And if you have the discipline, which is what they did in their missions, that allowed people to have freedom because they knew the way to do things. It was just rote. And so we had to put the systems in place in order to allow people to explore, to innovate. And so it was like another one of my advisors, Stephen Chipman. Stephen was one of a CEO at Grant Thornton who's done wonderful things in his career. And he said, listen, freedom within a framework. There's a framework. This is our strategy, and then there's freedom within it. So we focused on that a lot, so that people could explore, people could self-generate ideas. Your idea of me being a puppeteer, I don't know if it was that. I understand why you stated it. What I focused on, and I'm just making a point. What I focused on, James, was enabling people to be the best version of themselves, plucking people out of the line, plucking them out on the escalator, because they're behind the person that started 6 months before them. They're in line. They can never step out. I want to pluck that person out and go give them another opportunity. Pluck this person out and go give them another opportunity to explore, to expand, etc. There's dozens of examples at Baker Tilly of where sometimes I knew what was going to happen. Sometimes it was just what I felt in my belly, because I had the same situation. I had Tim. He didn't know it was going to work. My predecessor, when he put me in the international play, he had no idea. But he took the chance. It was a calculated risk, calculated. So we definitely wanted to embody the innovation gene, the innovation bug, the growth bug, the new way of doing things bug.
Empowering the people that work for you or work within the team. So, and you've mentioned time and time again, and it comes up in every conversation I have, that people are the bedrock of any successful business, especially in the accountancy practice sector. And I think you've been very good in saying that as we grew, we just created this culture. The culture got stronger and stronger. We know there's more to it, and you've kind of alluded to kind of what that was by setting these foundations or parameters around to allow that to happen. But so when you're approaching or looking and evaluating acquisition opportunities, how are you navigating through that people side and making sure that you've got those A players that you've referred to a few times, and then ensuring that post transaction those A players are still A players?
Yeah, great question. And we learned the hard way. we made some mistakes along the way, $1 million, multi-million dollar mistakes where we thought we had the right organization or the right people, and we didn't. And after one rather expensive acquisition that I'm happy to say, through parachuting a longtime partner from the legacy Baker Tilly into that market to turn it around, and we did, and it became one of the most profitable businesses in the firm. I sat back and trying to do a deep dive on, postmortem. What is it? Because we were always looking at people that signed on to our strategy. We wanted to make sure they signed on. And I said, that's not the question, the only question you need to ask. You need to ask, do they sign on? And are they most likely to be able to execute?
Yeah.
And the second question we didn't answer in this one merger, or we may, if we had asked it, we may have known the answer. And it came true. They were unable to execute the strategy. And so certainly culture, certainly values, certainly technical experience. Yes. Without that, those are table stakes.
It's
The
still difficult. So I was just say,
Please.
it's still difficult to evaluate that at the time, though, because I imagine, I know during transactions, you're mainly speaking to the leadership team. So they're you're hoping they're the reflection of their team and you can trust what they're talking about, their team members.
Look, you get to a point where the larger the firm, the more you can rely on the leaders to represent the partner group and the people group, because they're an organization. The smaller the firm, the more difficult it is. So you're right. So you need to meet as many people as you can, and then even then, you need to put a belt and suspenders on the deal. Mm-hmm. So after we had a potential failure, now it was a nosedive, and then we pulled it out of the nosedive, using a plain analogy. We decided to start putting legacy Baker Tilly partners who knew the firm, who knew how to innovate, who knew how to think about the strategy. We parachuted them into the firms that we merged with. So there was somebody from the mothership there 3 days a week. So they learned how the firm operates, so they could uptake the learnings much quicker. We found ways of bringing people from their firm into the decision-making committees and the task forces and leadership teams, and they would act as carrier pigeons. They'd come in, they'd get a message, they'd get a theme, and they'd bring it back to their people. It's never perfect. And the smaller the firm is, the smaller the generic firm, meaning they do everything, the harder it is. Mm-hmm. And we had done so many deals, we learned how to integrate. Not everyone was perfect. Not everyone came to where they needed to be as quickly as we'd like. But we were very disciplined and very, very intentional on how we would onboard the firms. But,
Of course,
nothing's perfect.
I think everyone we speak to has got an acquisition journey. The earlier acquisitions, they learn so much from that. Things they've done right, things they've done wrong, and as you said, you just take that experience and make sure you cover it off in the next one, and you continue growing. But I just wanted to come back to your point you was making there about sending someone from the mothership into that new acquisition to kind of spread the message, spread the word of the culture as such. It's interesting because when most people think about post-completion integration, they're thinking mainly around processes, they're thinking mainly around tech and software, and not that human integration. So it was interesting you made that point of, look, no, let's get people to go and not infiltrate, but be part of the new team.
Well, I'm going to take your point a step further. When you're doing an acquisition, you're not selling them on systems and technology and HR platforms. You are selling them on the ability to serve clients at a higher level, add additional services to the services they offer now. And so it's interesting. You sell them on the value of how they're going to be able to sell to their clients and serve their clients. Then you go to the systems where most people think, when you should be staying on with. And I remember we sent Tom down to Dallas, and his job was to work with all the partners to figure out how they could integrate and collaborate with all the specialists around the firm to better serve the Dallas partners. Yeah. if Tom hadn't been down there, they wouldn't even, one, they might not know who to call, but they might not even know there's an opportunity.
Yeah. And so, as we go back about these learnings and experiences, one acquisition after another, there's the Baker Tilly way on how you guys did things. But did you ever make an acquisition and see certain areas of how they did things and go, we like that, we might adopt that and take that forward ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great example. So in 2018 or so, we did a very small deal in Dallas. Great firm, very progressive firm, about 11 million turnover. So small for Baker Tilly's, from Baker Tilly's perspective. The next year or so, we did a much larger deal in Dallas, and I found out that the Dallas firm was on unlimited PTO, unlimited vacation, and I heard that we were going to make them go to 3 weeks or 35 days. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why? Well, because that's what we're on. Well, unbeknownst to me, we made the Houston firm go to our system. They were on unlimited vacation. And so we made this small firm. Then I was dumbfounded. And interestingly, the Dallas firm had done all the research. They had the data on usage and whether there was degradation in productivity, and they had all the data, and it was a success. And I put my foot down. It's like, under no uncertain terms, we are not moving Dallas away from. We're not going to have them come to our way. This is an opportunity for us to use their model to move our firm. And so we compromised. We'd let them do it for 6 months and watch them do it as part of Baker Tilly.
Got you. Right.
And then ultimately we did switch. But I'm like, so you're telling me we already had this opportunity last year, but remember, it was an $11 million firm and we were some 600 million. So 11 million, of course they come onto our platform. And then we had the bigger one. And then of course, the break the mold CEO said, time out, we're going there. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a trivial example, whether it is or not, it shows how my mindset is one of, I want to try new things. I want to break the mold. And so that was definitely one of them.
Yeah. Well, I think just having adopting that kind of position and mindset allows you to make sure that as you are going along your journey, you're going to have best in class in whatever that is, right? Or what you perceive to be best in class at that point in time. So that makes total sense. So just so we can see the width and breadth, sorry, of the acquisitions you made. You mentioned 11 million there. Was that the smallest acquisition you made at the time?
I want to say we did a $5 million deal.
Okay.
But they went from the lion's share of the deals. We made a living at $20 million to $50 million deals. Mm-hmm. We must have done 10 or 11 of them.
So the flooring was 5. What was the largest transaction that you?
125 million. The deal that happened right prior to my becoming the CEO was about 150, but during my tenure, it was 125. And I would say that 125 was much more valuable strategically than the 150. Now, some would say no, because the 150 got us from 300 million to 500 million. I understand that. It was in the state of Pennsylvania, wonderful state. The two markets were Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and then a lot in between. And nothing against those other markets. Wonderful people, wonderful markets. The California deal took me 3 years to get done, but that went from the Valley and the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay, LA, Orange County, and San Diego. That would have taken somebody a decade or a career to fill in, and then it would never have been integrated. So it was, it just was like, I won the lottery with that.
How did your role change as the business grew?
Interesting you asked that. I was just talking with somebody who's got a new role, and I said, there were 2 times when I sat at my desk and I started sweating. The first was when I became the managing partner of the Michigan practice. I remember in Southfield, Michigan, in the town center, I sat behind my desk when I was the managing partner. I'm like, now what? I used to quantify my and qualify my performance by the number of projects I did, the number of clients I looked after, the number of billable hours I had, whatever. And now I'm the managing partner. I'm like, now how do I design value or define value? I then again got elected to be the CEO, and it was even a more intense wave of emotion saying, I really have no idea what to do. How do I define value and progress? So yes, regardless, my responsibilities changed. At the early times, I was on the dance floor a lot. I was dancing with everybody. I was making the moves. I was teaching people how to dance or learning how to dance myself. And then as I continued to move through the years, I ended up on the dance floor. Excuse me, on the balcony, looking at the dance floor more often than I was on the dance floor. So
Yeah.
I was, and you use that puppeteer concept, and I understand that. I was looking for people, intentionally looking for people to pluck out of their environment to move to new opportunities, whether it be build an innovation hub, whether it be run the risk practice, whether it be run the small business practice, whether it be run offshoring, whether it be a new way of doing people solutions HR, whether it be taking a well-established young managing partner of a large metropolitan geography, plucking him out and making him the head of people because he was so good with people. And
Yeah.
talk about break the mold or talk about non-traditional. Whoa, what do you mean you're going to take him off the line? He's going to go the people leader. That's relegated for somebody that's not as valuable. We can't pay the people leader that much money. And I looked at the people. I'm like, what did you just say?
Yeah. Yeah.
People is the start, middle, and end of everything, and we can't pay the people leader what this gentleman's making. Really? Well, they put their
Yeah.
tail between their legs and walked away when I challenged them on that.
You certainly see that now. I think obviously we'll come on to it a little bit, but private equity flooded the market now here in the UK and US.
Sure.
And whenever the private equity first come in and they back a platform, whatever that platform may well be, one of the first hires they make is head of people or HR director of some kind to make sure that the people and the culture is right. And that probably would have been the case a few years back.
Right. Look, I needed to put the business back into our business of people. And what better way to take a very people-centric, people-forward operational leader, practice leader, to lead people? And it worked fabulously. He crushed it. And as a result, we crushed it.
And just on length of time to get deals done, I know there's always nuances and various dynamics that stall things or speed up transactions. But in your experience, did you find much difference in the time period of getting a deal done from first meetings and discussions to completion on a 11 million transaction to that 125 million?
No, you would think that it would take longer for the bigger one than the small one, but the small one, they're more nerve-wracked. They're more nervous. So it's a lot of getting to know them, building relationships. We did the $125 million from the second week of March of 2020 to September or October of 2020. So we got that deal done amidst COVID virtually. It was wonderful. So, but no, I don't see every deal is a big deal. Big deals they may be more complex, but they're not more complicated than small deals.
The fundamentals tend to stay the same,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
tend to stay the same.
Yes.
So on the strategy of Baker Tilly, obviously you mentioned the international part a number of times now, and Baker Tilly being a US centric firm, as you said. What was the thinking or strategy behind going international?
Well, look, in 2003, I was thrust into a job to be the international leader. And so I lived international. I remember building country desk platforms, the first of which was with Israel, and tri-listed companies, Tel Aviv market, and Nasdaq, and then AIM in your country. So I knew that there was business, and was always looking for an opportunity to become a global organization. And when RGL forensics came about, I'm like, let's go hard. We got to go get this. This gets it. So being international was a enormous focus of mine because we needed to serve international clients. And look, doing it through a network, okay. Doing it through your own people, much better.
Mhm. Yeah, and that takes me on to my next point, because there's lots of conversations ongoing, and there's a good friend of mine over in America. You probably know Alan Colton, who pretty much does what I do, but over in the US in terms of brokering deals and negotiating deals. We've been talking a long time about a truly global firm. When will we see that? Because we know the Grant Thorntons of this world, etc. That although they're the same branded and whatnot, there's different ownership, different infrastructure, different governance. As we're seeing the private equity pick up in the market and people moving into other territories, it feels to me that we are not that far away, maybe, from a truly global firm.
Yes and
I'd love to get
no.
your take on
Yeah,
that.
I don't think private equity. Look, on one hand, private equity is an enabler because of capital, and they've got people across the globe. On another hand, private equity, that's becoming a global organization is very complicated. And private equity has a mandate. They want to be very, very focused because they want to buy low, sell high. They don't want complications. They don't want difficulties. So I'm not so sure that private equity is going to be the impetus for that. I think the impetus for that is going to be differentiation and the ability to compete and serve. And so I don't think PE, personally, I don't think PE is the accelerant of that. I think it's a natural thing to be able to differentiate and sell. Is a global organization a hot spot for people to get all excited about? Yeah, maybe. Uh, will it happen? Sure, it'll happen. And you see in Europe, you see Grant Thornton, there was an announcement there. You see some of the big four, they've started consolidating, regional country firms, right? The Nordics, or, sure. Um, Lots of regulation, lots of governance, so there are some inhibitors to that. I'm not so sure, though, that PE is the accelerant or the activator that people might think.
But on that pathway and to achieve that global firm, we mentioned some of it now. You talked earlier about the Midlands versus London, different cultures, different people. As well as legislation and regulation, there's so many hurdles there, because you're going to have completely different cultures ultimately under the same ownership and roof. Which, it'd be great to hear your thoughts and challenges on that.
Well, look, I don't know. Are the Midlands and London any different than St. Louis and New York, or Pickett, another city in New York? Could be, because we're part of the same country, and we're able to do it. And again, it's interesting. Culture, is it really culture? As long as the values are identical or similar, I think you got a shooting chance.
Yeah,
And
and as
and
you
I
said,
please,
no, sorry, Alan,
please.
no, please.
Look, I think that people use culture as a big excuse. I think they use it as an excuse. They don't want change. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be found out that they don't want to move from a lifestyle business to a real business. So I challenge that. The culture is the reason. That's hogwash. It's something else than culture. Now, of course, if you've got a firm that is eat what you kill, and a sweatshop, et cetera, and they're not nice, okay, but that's got nothing to do with the Midlands and London, right? That's just got to do with the
That's just
people.
extremes. Yeah.
Exactly. So look, you said it earlier. How does growth negatively affect culture? Well, it can, if you don't have it done right, but it doesn't have to. It actually can enable a stronger culture. Can acquisitions enable a stronger culture? Sure. Look, we were a Wisconsin-based firm for a number of years. Great firm. We had the Wisconsin way of doing things. Is that culture? I don't know if that's culture or not. I can sit down and have a beer or a drink with them, and they're great people. They love their families. They are great friends. Maybe they drink beer more than I drink beer, or they drink milk with their lunch because they're the dairy state and I don't. Is that culture?
No.
I don't know. But what did we do? We went from Wisconsin to Minnesota. We went from Minnesota to Chicago, to Detroit, Detroit, Chicago, Chicago to DC, DC to New York, New York to Pennsylvania, and so on and so forth. And some would say, well, they're all different cultures. No, they're just different neighborhoods within a county, within a state.
And look, diversity, and as we know, diversity can build strength, right? Different ideas, different angles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Look, my strongest friends, my closest friends are the managing partner of the German firm at Baker Tilly and the managing partner of the UK firm, Rakesh Shauna, Ralph Groening and Rakesh.
Oh, we know Rakesh. Yeah.
You know Rakesh. Okay. Do they have different cultures? Some would say, of course they do, because one's a Brit and one's a German and one's an American. I don't know if they do or not.
But as long as they've got, as you said, that ethos and that value alignment, that's going to work. The diversification is a good thing.
So here's, I think, what it is. They may do things differently. Is that culture? They may decide things differently. Maybe that's culture. I don't know. Maybe that's just nature, nurture. Yeah, right? It's the nature versus nurture. Okay, well, if the juice is worth the squeeze, if the prize is great enough, you're going to figure out a way to how to collaborate.
Yep. Going back to your point earlier on, where you were talking about that trunk and that strategy, I think it's, for the independent firms right now in the market. I know there's many independent firms that are a little bit worried about private equity coming in and what it's going to mean for them in the UK market. I'm not so sure over the US, but also there's a lot of fantastic, amazing businesses in the independent when I'm speaking to them, and I really think if they've got that clear strategy and they stay in their lane and they execute it correctly, right now there's going to be more opportunity than ever for them to flourish and succeed away from the private equity models. And I keep having those conversations with the owners of the businesses, and I think more of them now are realizing that as they navigate through this disruption that we're seeing in the market at the moment.
I would agree with that. I would add to that many firms want to be like the larger firms. They want to be full service. And some of these larger firms are getting PE back, so they're getting larger and they're building more capabilities. And so if you're going to try to be like those other firms, you have to be really like those other firms, and you probably have to follow suit. However, to your point, regardless of whether you take PE money or, let me say this, sponsor money, doesn't have to be PE. It can be an ESOP. Rakesh listed. Right, he didn't take PE money. He listed. FHA did. AIM. Yeah. So we're right. It was on the AIM, or it was on NYSE. Yes, AIM, London Stock Exchange. Okay.
Yeah.
AIM. Okay, which makes sense. So the PE is getting a lot of bad rap because it's so popular, or so in the news. It's any institutional investor. It's any. So take that aside. If you want to be a top tier firm, you need a strategy, you need intentionality, you need discipline, and you need to not be a lifestyle business. Full stop. Whether you're partner owned or you're institutionally owned. And yes, do I believe that you can succeed without taking financial capital, a sponsor? I do. Do I think you are likely to? You are less likely to, because self-governance is not as intentional as outside governance. Case in point, do you go to the gym? You go to the gym at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Are your workouts as intense when you're by yourself as compared to when you have a trainer with you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. So think of the institutional investor as your trainer. They're going to push you harder, right? If you're just partner-led, you're not going to push yourself as hard. There's a phrase that, it's not my phrase, but I've started using it. In the partner-led organizations, good enough is good enough. We did it. It's good enough. We'll do it again next year. And when you have an institutional investor, good enough may not be good enough.
And we've certainly seen that dynamic at play in terms of, over here in the UK, and probably the same in the US. That a few decades gone by, there was 4 guys or girls that would set up an accountancy practice together. They'll build it all the way through, and then they retire together. Now you've got different age demographics within the partnership, right? So you've got
Yeah.
the older guys or girls. They're like, I've only got a few more years left until I retire. So this is great. I'm getting loads of nice profit coming through. Let's maximize the income for me. Whereas the younger generation can see what's going on in the market, what's evolving. We need to reinvest. We need to move with the times. And there's that clashing of heads. Whereas private equity or outside investment sponsor, as you say, is kind of taking that out of the way, saying, older guys and girls, don't worry about it. You've been paid out. Let these guys drive the business forward.
Well, yes and
Not in all
no.
circumstances, but we've
Yeah.
seen that a lot. We have seen that a lot.
Have you? Okay. I have not seen the showing the older crew the door type thing, but okay, I can see that. I certainly understand it.
Maybe not door, but it at least de-risks them and say, okay, we don't have to reinvest money. We'll stay on, but we've had a nice golden handshake or a nice payday.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
So, just future gazing then, Alan, just before we do close up, with all the changes and developments that are going on with the accounting practice space at the moment, from AI and tech and private equity and other areas and regulation changes, where do you see the profession as a whole in the next 5, 7, 10 years? What are you expecting to see that the outlook of the industry will look like, but also what a fully fledged advisory accountancy practice looks like?
A lot of people, James, are saying that PE is bad and it's not going to work, etc. And I don't know, not everything is going to work, but not every firm works regardless. And I believe that the fact that these firms are willing to take on an external sponsor or shareholder to improve their performance and go from a lifestyle business to more of a business can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing. Now, some would say it's never going to work economically, and carving off this amount of earnings to give to the people. Well, look, most firms are valued at less than one times revenue because they can't afford to be more than that, because the partners can't. They're not in the capital markets. They can only mortgage their home and their summer home. They don't have 5 homes to mortgage, and and nobody would say they should. So if you are valued at, let's say, 80% of revenue, that 20% is never going to be monetized. So you're giving that 20% to the sponsor for nothing. Well, or you're not losing it because you really didn't own it, but it's monetizing. So, and to de-risk the partners to make the investments, I think it's a good thing for the profession, for the industry. If it's a profession, the CPA profession versus industry, I think it's a good thing. Will everybody survive? No, but that happens as it is. I mean, look at Anderson. They made a huge mistake, and it's horrible that it happened. They were a partner-led organization.
Yeah.
And they fell from high on grace, right? So I think it's a good thing as long as the firms focus on what they need to be focusing on. Look, bad firms that go into a sponsor environment probably still stay bad firms. Good firms get better.
Yeah, I think from my experience over here, certainly in the UK market, I think PE, what it has done is it has disrupted, but it's shone a light on some of the areas that did need to improve. For that very reason, when you said, well, good is good enough, there wasn't maybe as much innovation right across the width and breadth of the profession, whereas private equity's come in, people professionalising their businesses. And what that's done is, as you said, the independent firms that do wish to stay independent are going, I like that. I'm going to take a couple of things out their playbook. I mean, for the first time, we're seeing so many independent firms that are employing non-fee earning individuals to have that infrastructure where they've got experts in place. Head of marketing actually is an expert in marketing, head of HR and compliance, so that the accountants do what the accountants do, and they're not trying to be and wear all these different hats.
Look, the term cross-sell, or I like to say cross-serve, has been around for a long, long time. PE firms or sponsors don't have the silver bullet for cross-serve. It's still very, very difficult for a sponsor-backed firm to cross-serve. And so you just got to get after it, whether you're sponsor-backed or whether you're independent. There's no magic to this. It's execution. It's deliberate, intentional execution.
Go back to strategy, as you
Yeah, it
say.
goes back to straight. Yeah, well, you remembered. You're
Yep.
gonna think about that tree every time you look at a tree. You're gonna think of me. Wow, that's Whitman's tree.
Alan, look, thanks for spending an hour or so of your time with us. It's been great talking and learning from your experiences and hearing the stories as well. I love some of those stories. It's been great. When's the book out? Later this year, you said?
Yeah, it'll be out in the fall. Around the Thanksgiving time. Maybe it may have to bleed into early December, but it'll be out. We'll get in front of you so you can be my my spokesperson for the book and the town crier in the UK.
I will
And we'll send you a
definitely. I'd
copy.
love a copy of it. Yeah, please do.
And if you do bump into Rakesh on the streets of London, tell him that I said hello. And again, thank you for having me join your podcast. It's been a pleasure.
No, likewise. Thanks. It's been an honor having you on. Thanks for joining M&A Diaries, Alan. And you take care. Have a good day.
All right. Cheers. Bye.